Once again, we'd like to welcome you to the Lead with Purpose Rypple webinar. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to your moderator for today's session, Mr. Nick Stein, Director of Content and Media at Rypple. Nick?
Thanks very much, Rich, and welcome everyone to the latest webinar in Rypple's Leadership Series. We are really excited to have a very influential and well-respected executive coach, John Baldoni, with us to share insights from his soon-to-be-published book, Lead with Purpose. But before I introduce John, I'd like to say just a few words about today's subject, leadership. Recently, Accenture conducted a survey to find out why it is employees leave. And the top reasons people left their jobs had nothing to do with how they actually felt about the work they did. Instead, they related to workplace culture and to the leaders who established that culture. Things like their boss was a jerk, they didn't feel empowered, they were stifled and frustrated by internal politics, and they weren't being recognized for doing good work. So what exactly does all this feedback mean for leaders? Well, we think it suggests that the biggest impact a leader can have is to set a positive tone and tenor for an organization. When it comes to the holy grail of business known as discretionary output, that magical thing that ties someone to the larger mission and purpose of their organization and inspires them to stay late or to come in early. A new study by Blessing White found that the difference maker was leadership. Now here at Rypple, we believe that a big part of being a great leader is helping those on your team know where they stand and how their daily work ties into the larger goals of the organization. So rather than static, top-down edicts sent down from Mount Olympus, goals on Rypple are flexible measures that change as business conditions change. They're bottom-up as well as top-down, so employees at all levels feel empowered. Everyone working on a goal is connected and has visibility in real time into what everyone else is working on. So they always know where they stand and how their work connects to the larger goals of the organization. And when someone completes an action, everyone on the goal is notified in real time so they can adjust course or even send a public message of recognition. So what does it take to create a great leadership culture at work? That's where our guest today comes in. John Baldoni has coached managers and leaders at many world-class organizations. He's written about the subject for Harvard Business Review, BNet, and Fast Company, and he's published 10 books on the subject, including his latest, which will be out very soon, Lead with Purpose. And on that note, I would like to say that we are very excited to have John with us today to share his insights on what it takes to lead with purpose. John?
Well, thank you, Nick. I appreciate that kind welcome, and thank you for setting the ground for the role that leadership plays. I would probably drive it a little bit deeper, that underline that leadership, and I like the way you talked about connecting the dots, because that gets to the topic today, purpose. What am I working for and why? And that's really all about purpose. And so often I've told folks that I'm working on this book and it's soon to be out. Folks have said, that's such a great idea. And then they started thinking about it, and I go, what exactly is purpose? And let me just give you a picture. I mean, when I go into an organization, and I have the opportunity because I'm an outsider and a leadership educator and consultant and coach, and so I'm in and out of lots of organizations, and I have the privilege of sampling different cultures. And when an organization has purpose, that is, people know what they do, why they do it, and how it matters, that feeling is palpable. You just know that people are focused. They know what they want to achieve. And you can feel it in the way they interact with one another, but with their supervisors, with their colleagues, with their direct reports. Everybody's in it together, and it's like a team in a way, and it becomes a winning team. It's a spirit. So purpose has a deep and fundamental connection to all of us as human beings. And you can say that purpose it's a combination of your focus and your drive. And, all of us as human beings, we really have this desire to work on a cause or on a project, something that's bigger than ourselves. And that can come from working on a small team with a process innovation. It can come from working on a product team and launching it. It can come from working in a social enterprise where you're making lives better for other individuals. Wherever the purpose comes from, when it's manifest in the behaviors and the actions of the organization, it is tangible, and it's an exciting place to be, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. There's a quote: the secret of success is constancy to purpose. In other words, being focused. And the good thing about purposeful organizations, and Nick, you set it up very nicely when you talked about it, purposeful organizations value their people. And what that means is it opens the door to other things. It opens the door to innovation. And when you do that, you link what an employee does to the bigger picture, the greater whole. So if I'm creative, if I am a collaborative person, I can see the output of what it is I do. Purposeful leaders are clear thinkers. In other words, they see the big picture. And they also provide that clarity to the organization. As you said, Nick, they connect the dots. How my job in whatever function I'm in, human resources, logistics, product development, marketing, I know that what I do in my organization connects to the greater whole. And also, purposeful leaders are, not only do they think clearly, they think ahead. And they think ahead so well that they are focused on the next generation of leaders. And that, of course, lays the foundation for future success. So driving down just to kind of set a baseline for where we are with purpose, you can consider it to who and why. The who is who we are as an organization and who we are as individuals. But who we are as an organization, what is it we stand for? What is it that we are trying to accomplish? And why is it that we're trying to do what? And when organizations succeed, it's because they know what they do, that is, who they are, what they do, and why they do it. We say they have purpose, okay? And I like to say that purpose is the great untapped reservoir that leaders can use to achieve sustainable results. We talked about they value their people. So the great thing about purpose, when you have a purposeful organization, you mine it, direct it, develop it, nurture it, the great thing about it, it's free. It's in the talent and skills of your individuals. You're not adding anything on. You're, in a sense, drawing out what it is. And what leaders do is draw it out, develop it, and put that purpose to good work. And purpose then is that driving force, where you want to go and what it is you want to achieve. Purpose is the why behind what we do and how we achieve it. Now, I like to say there's some elements of purposeful work. And in this, I'm probably borrowing from the great management philosopher Abraham Maslow, whose book, The Hierarchy of Needs, sketched all of this kind of stuff out for us. So in a way, I'm just following in Dr. Maslow's grand footsteps. And the baseline is meaning. We want to have some meaning in our work. We want to know that our work matters. On a day-to-day purpose, we want to have a sense of accomplishment. For individual contributors, that might be ticking off the boxes at the end of the day. In other words, this is what I did today. For leaders, for managers, and higher levels of hierarchy, that's more of a longitudinal thing because you're planning weeks ahead, months ahead, sometimes years ahead. And certainly with a product launch, it can take several years to get things off the ground. Or with an organizational transformation, it takes a long time. So whatever it is, we want to have meaning in it. Satisfaction. Hey, I did my job well, and I know it. Satisfaction also comes from the team having performed well. And the thing is when we think of satisfaction, we also think of compensation. But compensation, as so much of the research shows us, is really just is that satisfier. But if we don't feel we're being adequately compensated, there's a lot of dissatisfaction. But it isn't it isn't the great enabler to total fulfillment. It is a satisfier. The next step, and this is where we're moving up the hierarchy, is enrichment. And this is where motivation comes in, and that people are looking for more than just money. As long as we feel we're being adequately compensated, what do we want? We want recognition. We want that pat on the back. But even more so, we want to know that our work matters. And how will our work matter? Well, I'd like to dissect it in a few different ways. As I touched on earlier, the work has to have meaning for us and for the organization. It also has to have momentum to it. It has to have impact. In sales, we say we move the needle. All right, it means we increase sales by 10%. Well, what does it mean to have impact in HR or to move the needle in logistics? Well, it's however you quantify it, but it's substantive gains. Fulfilling a project. If for example, if you're in HR, creating a new leadership development program, reaching out to new hires, developing new forms of retention, all of that, promoting people. That's how you move the needle. And if those folks should feel enriched by the meaning that work that they've created and the payoff for the employees that they create. And the final stage, of course, is if we have good meaning, if we're satisfied, if we feel enriched in our work, we're happy. And, the wonderful thing about happiness, and some studies came out about 2 years ago, maybe not quite that long, that happiness is actually contagious. And that's good news for managers. It's good news for managers who look on the bright side of things in the sense that if you smile, other people smile with you. And that's that old cliche that we all, smile and the world smiles with you. We love to hear that, but it actually works. And so the happiness is, it can't be a false happiness. It can't be a temporary thing. If it's built upon meaning, satisfaction, and enrichment, it's really the ultimate fulfillment. We feel enriched in our jobs, we feel enriched by our careers, and we feel and we make the entire enterprise feeling the same way. So we have a bunch of happy people, if we will. Now, in the course of my work for the book, I did a lot of interviews with thought leaders and with CEOs from the profit and nonprofit sectors. And I also did some survey work in conjunction with my publishers Amicom Books. It's owned by American Management Association, and they have a great database of folks. So we surveyed folks and asked them various questions about purpose. And when we talked about purpose in the workplace, 90% of those surveyed said leaders, when it comes to that, must communicate, link the work for results. That's what you were talking about earlier. Nick was talking about that. Show the customer benefit. Do what you say you're going to do. Hey, and instill confidence. And confidence is critical. So purpose, these are the things. You think of communication and linking work to results, and in confidence, these are things that nurture purpose. These are things that make purpose meaningful. Move it from the abstract to the concrete. And why move it to the concrete, to the specific? So you get things done. And by the way, just to reiterate, I'm happy to take questions at the end, so feel free to jot them down now or type them in. Nick will be keeping track of them, and we'll discuss them at the end. So keep those questions coming if you have them. Purpose. Purpose is, I say the origin of purpose. I might even want to say catalyst. Because purpose is the catalyst, and it sparks your vision, mission, and values, okay? Sometimes we get tongue-twisted about what our mission and vision is what's the difference between the two. And to be honest with you, if you mix up what mission is, what your vision is, it's not the end of the world, as long as you have a vision, as long as you have a mission or a combination of the two. But if you're going to separate them, what is it? Vision is where you want to go. And the great thing is that purpose is the underlying of that. So, for example, the great thing about vision, it's a process of becoming. It is, we want to become the most respected. We want to become the number one. We want to be the most cherished in whatever field we are. And the payoff is our mission, what it is we do, which is tied into your purpose, the what you do and why you do it. And the thing about mission is what you do. And I always like to talk about mission. It's also what you don't do. And one of my favorite stories about when defining mission is thinking about what it isn't. And that's part of the strategic imperative as well, but thinking about what you don't do. And Michael Porter, the great strategist at Harvard, came up with that saying, strategy is often what you don't do. Same with mission. In other words, take the social service agency Habitat for Humanity. They enable people from disadvantaged communities to build their own homes. That is their mission. Do they feed people? No. Do they clothe people? No. Do they provide jobs for people? No. All of those things are laudable aims, of course, but that's not the mission of Habitat for Humanity. Same with a business, okay? And understanding the mission, what it is you do and what it is you don't do, is critical to getting things done. Now, the third component in there from your vision, mission, is your values. And what are values? It's what holds you together. It's what we believe in, what we want to achieve. We know what we do, what we want to go, how we do it, but it's more of the how we do things, how we interact with one another. What is our culture like? Are we open-minded to ideas from below, or is everything top-down? Do we share things between functions, or are we totally siloed? What about behaviors? How do we treat our colleagues? And I've heard this before. When organizations have a strong sense of values, when people get out of line, in other words, kind of mistreat others, in a sense of verbally coming down strongly on someone else, or not respecting ideas, or acting in a too hierarchical fashion, people will say, Joe, you're not living the values. And in an organization that cherishes its values, and those values mean something, that statement resonates. So I like to look at values on the positive side, but it can also be the reinforcement. It underlines and enables your vision and your mission to succeed. So these are important concepts, and they're sparked by purpose. Now, the thing about purpose is, why do we do it? Well, it leads to results. In other words, results, what it is you want to achieve. And, in any organization, especially large organizations, sometimes we kind of sit around, maybe that's the proverbial water cooler or the break room, and you go, well, I wish we could do this, or I wish we could do that. Well, that's where purpose gets involved, because purpose is your action step, okay? Purpose is what you're creating. The mission and values are fundamental, but you need to put them into gear. You need to make them happen. And it's the act of what is it we do, how are we going to do it, all right? What are our ideas? Where are those ideas going to come from? Our people, our customers, wherever, all right? The next step is to engage those ideas. Ideas are floating out there in kind of the soup of the organization, the ether, if you will. But it's taking those ideas and channeling them, all right, and putting one and one together to make 3, 4, and 5. And what we need is collaboration, all right? Clarity, when we know where we're going, when we're clear on our objectives and we're clear on our strategies, we can collaborate. We can bring people together. And that it creates a sense of shared mission, shared purpose, and we actually work together. And this is where your values come in. If we have strong values, which would say that we want to work together, we want to coordinate, we insist on collaboration. When people do not collaborate, then you can call them out on that, all right? And then the final step is really where where your ideas meet reality, and that's getting things done, what we call execution. And the nature of purpose is that it's all about execution, because the purpose of whatever it is you want to do, you want to get things done. You want to make things happen. You want to execute. And execute is turning those dreams and that purpose into a new process, a new product, a new solution for a customer. Whatever it is, it's purposeful, and you're getting things done. So very important to think about why purpose matters. It's that focus and that drive, but it's the focus and the drive intended in a direction so you can make things happen, okay? Now, people, absolutely. People are important. How often have you heard in an organization, people are our most valuable resource? Of course you've heard it so many times, the words become meaningless, and that's why an organization like Rypple is so important, because it can help you make people a priority and make them feel it and quantify it and help you know where you're going. So how do you prioritize people? Well, it's your behaviors, how you treat other people. An executive I interviewed for the book, Vineet Nair, who runs HCL Technologies, the CEO, which is a global IT services firm headquartered in India, but is global. Vineet has inverted the pyramid. He wrote a book called Employees First, Customers Second, and he views himself as the CEO at the bottom of this inverted pyramid. He's there to serve the organization. He believes very much in transparency. He has 360 evaluations of himself that he posts online for HCL employees to to look at and see how is he doing. Vineet told me, he said, I'm the enabler. The men and women on the top of the pyramid, which is really what we would call the bottom in most pyramids, those are the men and women who are innovating, creating, making the products and services that HCL markets to its customers. So he's the enabler. Let me take it another step. An executive I work with in a health firm views her role. She says, she's the CEO because I have an open door policy. All right, and that means any employee can come to me. But and she said, you know what? Employees don't abuse that. I get very few things kicked up the line. But what it does do is, if she as the CEO has that open door policy where employees can come in and discuss issues, whatever it is, then she's doing it, then every one of her managers and on down the line must be walking that same talk. So that open door policy. These are behaviors that when you say we put people first, these are things that matter. These are things that make that positive difference. And when we prioritize people, this is how we make it. So how do you put people first? Well, some of the research I said, rewards. You need compensation, time bonuses, of course, very important. Developmental opportunities, timely recognition, and promoting from within. Some of these ideas. So nothing earth-shattering here, but it's what it's what employees and managers we talked to said they wanted. Okay. Now let's get to, what does the team need to know about purpose, and how do I make purpose relevant to my team? Two questions. The first one is, you need to answer that for yourself and for your team. Say you work in finance, okay? What makes your work purposeful? This is where you have that opportunity to connect the dots, okay? Think about it. If I work in finance, I'm responsible for the cash flow of the organization, as well as providing planning the financial component of planning for where the organization is go. How you explain that as the finance manager for your team is important. Then they say, this is what I do. I'm not just balancing numbers here. I'm enabling my company to stay afloat, to buy another enterprise, or to invest in something else. And yes, on the surface, if you work in finance, you know vaguely what finance is all about. But it's important that if you're the head of finance, the CFO, to really talk about how finance drives the operations of the company. Or pick HR, what HR really does for the company, or what product development really does. Connect the dots for your people. And then the next step is, okay, that's the big picture, if you will. How do you make purpose relevant to your team? How do you make it explicit? Okay, so this is where you talk about with your team, what the individuals on the team have contributed, how they've made the department run better, how they've served the customers, how they have fulfilled the purpose. So this is all part of the prioritization of people. It's part of the grand scheme of connecting the dots, but it's also the part where you make the work that you do explicit and link it to what it is that you do on a daily basis. And I know that sounds kind of remedial and basic, but you would be surprised at how few companies actually do it. And as I told you earlier, I have the privilege of going to lots of different companies. And when I talk to individuals, I might say, what is it you do? And they can, invariably, someone will give me a very short and concise description of what their job is and what their objectives are. But then I'll say, well, how does that contribute to the entire whole of the company or the enterprise? And sometimes they will draw a blank. More often than not, they will draw a blank. Now, that doesn't mean that and when they draw that blank, when I see that blank stare, that's not a reflection of intelligence on the employee. That's a reflection on the failure of management, a failure of leadership to educate that individual as to what the purpose of the organization is, and more especially how that individual contributes to that purpose. So it's important to connect the dots. So how do you instill purpose? Okay. Well, we talked about it earlier in our research, is communicate. One of the companies one of the leaders I talked to is Paul Seligman runs Barrel Companies. Now, Barrel Companies is headquartered in Texas. It's a call service for healthcare, and so most of the employees, 85% I think, are frontline people who spend their time on the phone. A majority of which are women. And they are talking about helping patients in different hospitals, whomever they are, make their appointments, set up appointments, follow through care, all this stuff. It's actually important stuff, okay? And they link that. So when someone's taking a phone call, they talk about how that they're helping that patient make better healthcare decisions, but manage their care more effectively, take better ownership of it. Now, these are not physicians or these are not healthcare workers, but they're enablers of the healthcare process. And Barrel Companies works a lot to communicate the role of the importance of what their employees do. How they act on that is Barrel Companies is somebody that puts its money where its mouth is. For example, when we went through the downturn, and we're still suffering through many of its effects today, Barrel did not cut its employee workforce significantly, and continued to make investments in its employees' 401k program. So that's acting. And the next step is leading. Paul and his leadership team are looking for ways to continue to drive purpose so they can serve their customers more effectively, so they can engage their employees more effectively. So it's this communication, acting, and leading. It's a continuous process. That's how you instill purpose. And linked to all of that is a form of recognition, how you tie in what people have done well and how you give them that pat on the back, be it in form of increased compensation or recognition or promotion, whatever that is. So instilling purpose then becomes an active act. It's nothing you take for granted. And unfortunately, as Nick was saying in his opening remarks, so often people leave organizations because they feel they are taken advantage of. They are just going through the motions and no one really cares. And unfortunately, it's often your best performers who may feel that way if they're not being recognized for the work that they do. The other thing about purpose, very important, is purpose provides clarity. It makes ambiguity understandable. And let's be honest, since the big crash in 2008 that we're still navigating our way through, and sometimes we think we're out of it, and then you have days today like it seems like we're not out of it. We're in this continuous cycle of, not a cycle, but a turn of things aren't clear. All right, we don't know what the next steps are going to be. The old ways of doing things don't work anymore. Maybe the trusted things we thought that would always be there for us aren't there anymore. So things are ambiguous. So that when there is ambiguity, it's up to leaders to step to the fore. And leaders cannot clarify the entire world, but they can clarify the picture for your organization and provide that sense of clarity so that, hey, this is what's going on, this is how it's affecting us, and this is what we're going to do about it. And it's important for leaders to be out front about making that ambiguity and providing clarity in our world, because there is great uncertainty, and it's up to leaders to cut through that and to make it clear. So we have some survey research on that. So when asked what did employees and managers we talk to want to know, well, it's up to leaders to provide vision, set expectation, and planning. These are three ways that you provide clarity. This is where we're going. This is what I expect of you, and all of us are together in planning and making this happen. Or a third step would be acting on our plans. We engage in the planning, make it happen. So this is plan. So now my next slide is something I developed about when we talk about ambiguity, it's with us. It's the gray becomes the new norm, and I'm not talking about ethics things. I mean, to me, ethics are still black and white. If it's right, it's right. It's wrong, it's wrong. Let's not cut corners on that. But when we talk about a direction of an organization or with our 24/7 global economy, things get blurred and dull, and there is less. Uncertainty becomes more of the norm than certainty itself. So what does a leader do? How is a leader to navigate that? Well, the first thing is, I like to say, you square the circle. So what does that mean, square the circle? You put a parameter about, this is what we do, this is what we don't do. It's about defining your mission. It's also about when you have an ambiguous situation or you're operating in a form of uncertainty, this is what we know, and this is what we're clear about it. So in other words, you're putting a parameter around the challenge, a parameter around the problem, a parameter around the situation. What does that do? It says, okay, this is what I will focus on. There's a boulder in our path. That's what we're going to attack. We're not going to worry about the ruts on the side of the road or the trees off in the distance. We're just going to get rid of that boulder. We are squaring the circle, okay? Our next step is, and this is what managers do. This is why the Western management model is so respected. It's because we know how to get things done. We are pragmatic. Good managers are pragmatists. They don't sit around and wonder a great deal. They get things done. It is important to think. It is important to plan. It is important to reflect. But ultimately, management is an act of pragmatism. It is about making things happen. It is about trying things. Whenever I think of pragmatism, I always go back to one of my favorite leaders in history, and that was Franklin Roosevelt. And certainly in the 100 days that he was after he was inaugurated in his presidency in 1933, when the U.S., as the rest of the world, was pretty much economically prostrate, his great thing was try something, try anything, but by gosh, do something, try anything. In other words, that's that sense of pragmatism. Don't sit around and moan about it. Be pragmatic. Also, good leaders, good managers, they persevere. They don't get put off by the first obstacle. They don't throw up their hands and say, oh, we can't do it. Sometimes it's important to do that. If the challenge is too great, you say, hey, it's not this time. We don't have the manpower. We don't have the resources. We don't have the funds to do this. But by and large, the spirit is one of perseverance. It's, I'm going to give it my best. Sometimes the odds are with me, and sometimes the odds are against me. But by gosh, I'm going to give it my best try. Perseverance is critical. And in a quote that one of my favorite quotes toward this comes from the great UCLA basketball coach John Wooden, who died last year at the grand old age of 99. And Coach Wooden used to say, do not let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. Now think about that. Do not let what you cannot do interfere with what you can do. And that is a powerful quote because so often, especially in organizations, and maybe larger organizations more than smaller, we think, oh, well, my boss won't go for this, or my teammates aren't going to go for this, or I can't get the money for this, so I'm not even going to try. So we defeat ourselves before we even get out of the try something. We're not being pragmatic. And in fact, we're not even squaring the circle. We're just throwing up our hands. Following through on what Wooden's quote of, do not let what you cannot interfere with what you can do, that's perseverance. And the final step in providing clarity, I think, for an organization is the essence of providing cheer. You know, we talked earlier about happiness being contagious and people sharing in that. Managers have to spread, leaders especially, have to spread optimism. Leaders must have that mindset that the glass is always half full. That doesn't mean that they're Pollyannish, but it does mean that they believe in the possibility rather than the impossibility of things. Now, turning attention into results. We want to make things happen. That's what we've been talking about. That is our pragmatism. That's what we do. All right? Now, we have some survey information. Part of making things happen requires innovation, thinking out of the box. What do? Identify what it takes to be creative, to innovate. Internal think tanks challenge others to think creatively. And, very importantly, if you want people to think creatively, reward them for doing so. Don't just ask for ideas. Put some skin in the game. This is what we'll do if you come up with it. Okay, where does the stimulus for innovation comes from? So often I think we hamstring ourselves. We have such impossible dreams for impossible expectations for what innovation is. We often think of it as the next iPod or the next iPad, iPod, iPhone. It doesn't have to be a breakthrough. Sometimes innovation is nothing more than removing a step from a process and making it easy. It's a way of enabling customers to connect more directly with the company which they patronize. Whatever it is, it's applied creativity. So where does the stimuli, where do the ideas come from? They come from your employees, especially anybody working with your customers. That's a fountain source of innovation. They come from your customers. This is what our customers want. Hey, what are our competitors doing? I should be checking them out. This doesn't mean following these examples are all. They're simply stimuli for what innovation is. And why innovation is tied to purpose is a very important process, because purpose is where helps you. It's the what and the why of the work. But the what and the why of the work may be shifting. You have to be nimble. Life is seldom linear. It's a zigzag process. You have to be creative. You have to think. And so all of us, I think, have a capacity to offer some suggestions for doing things differently. That's creativity. So our brains are, I like to think, there's a slide I have paired for innovation. Left brain, right brain. So often in management, we work in the logical and the rational. That's good. We're verbal and we're objective, and we're focused on time and accuracy. Bingo, that's good. But that's not enough, especially in our times of uncertainty, especially in times when we're challenged to create results. We have to be imaginative. We have to, at times, be visual. We have to be perceptual. And we have to deal with ambiguity. And there's being totally left brain, being totally right brain. Some of us are wired that way, but we need, as a manager, you need a little bit of both. But more importantly, you've got a team left brain dominant thinkers with right brain dominant thinkers. In other words, that's how you can create a foundation or a situation for where innovation can spark. Okay, how do you support innovation? This is very critical. So often management says we got to be innovative, but the challenge is how do you got to create those conditions for success. So if you want people to innovate, give them the authority to do it. Small thing, maybe employees should be coming up with their own job descriptions. Emotionally, engage them. View them as contributors, not as collaborators. And take the long view of things. You know, it's easy to become discouraged, especially when we're talking about innovation. As a matter of fact, most innovations, most new ideas don't succeed. Well, you know, that's reality. That's life. But yet, that should not be the stopper. That should not keep you from moving forward. You have to support that. And this is where you have to make it safe for people to fail. Good story I missed. One of the legendary heads of Jet Propulsion Laboratory, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, was Charles Elaki. And there's a great story told about Dr. Elaki. There were 2 back-to-back missions to Mars, which were both catastrophic failures. And the mission heads of both those programs went to see Dr. Elaki. I don't know if it was individually or separately, and they offered their resignation. After all, their mission had failed, and so they thought, well, I think I should go too. And Elaki looked at both of them and said, gentlemen, I just spent $400 million educating you. Why would I fire you? In other words, you have to, if you're going to go out on a limb, if you're going to take risks, if you're going to innovate, failure might be an option. But as long as that you've done things as correctly as you see them at the moment, and as long as you can reflect on that failure and figure out what went wrong, then you should be able to proceed. And so make it safe for people to fail. This is not and prevail. By making it safe to fail doesn't mean you're encouraging undue risk or undue chances, but you're allowing people to innovate, to think creatively. And again, in our research show that when we think about risk-taking, you want to challenge employees, reward them for it, provide strategic guidance for direction. So, for example, the risk has to be managed, of course, financially, but then also whatever it is you're doing must be in line with what the company is doing. So, for example, going back to our rocket scientists, if one of those guys had taken that $200 million and built a chain of restaurants, okay, well, that's a risk for JPL and for NASA, but that's not an efficient use of his funds. He's supposed to be building a mission to Mars. So he was taking risks within the mission to Mars, not doing what he wanted to do. So, and also recognize people who take risks and who make challenge. So engagement creates how you make it safe for people is you build trust. Engagement is that connection, working one-on-one with individuals as individuals or in groups to make people feel that they belong. And trust is endemic to that. Part of the diagnostic toward this, and I'm kind of rushing along a little bit here, is what's happening, what are people saying about it, and what can you do to help. Managers need to keep their ears to the ground, listen for trouble, look for trouble, not to catch people out, but to find out how they can help them overcome the obstacles, how they can be an asset to the organization. And part of that also comes from enabling others to lead. That's a very important part of what purpose is all about. It's creating that next generation of leaders. The success we have now is not a guarantee that we'll be successful tomorrow. So it's up to us to create the foundation to build upon, to become the purposeful organization that we want to become, and that calls for opening the doors for others to lead. And I want to go one more slide here, and that talks about how we develop our leaders. And you can do it organizationally or individually. So it's the capability. What do I need to know about you? How competent you are. What does it take to be a leader in our organization? And finally, the challenges. What's holding leaders back from leading? Solutions. What can you bring to the table? How can you help us solve our issues? And opportunities. What can we make happen? What are the positives? And I'll leave you with one final slide that gets to the heart of what leadership is and what purpose is all about. And this is the leader's role. And so what do leaders do? Leaders must do three things. Leaders are seen, heard, and there. In other words, people need to see you. They need to physically see you. And I know in co-located locations, that's not always right. So how can you make yourself visible? All right. What are the ways you do that? Virtually can be, by connecting with email or telepresence or whatever it is, connecting regularly with your people. That's part of being seen. Be heard. Stay on message. Listen to what others are telling you. And the final step, if you're leading a purposeful organization or seek to be a purposeful leader, you must be there. Now, what does be there mean? It's the metaphorical aspect of leadership. Sometimes it's your physical presence. Sometimes I have a CEO, friend of a small publishing firm. When the firm is shipping a lot of orders, he goes on the loading dock and helps pack boxes, okay? That's being there for the organization. It's also being there as that form of inspiration, the shoulder to lean against for the organization, the one that is accountable, the go-to person for your organization, the one that everyone can holds accountable, and you embrace that accountability. That's what it means to be there. And it's important for a purposeful organization to have a foundation of a leader who supports the people as well as supporting the organization. And you can't do one without the other. And that brings my formal remarks to a close. And now I'm welcoming your questions, and I thank you for staying in on this presentation.
Well, thank you very much, John. That was terrific and very insightful. And people have been sending in some questions, so I'm going to jump right in and read one of them. There's someone listening in who says, when I work with organizations, most shy away from the people question because it's so painful to deal with people, because people are unpredictable. And essentially, how do you help leaders accept the unpredictability of people? I know one of the things that we encourage at Rypple is more frequent contact and more frequent involvement between a leader or manager and the people that they interact with. So rather than just, getting to talk once or twice a year about setting goals or performance, it really becomes a regular, frequent, ongoing conversation so that unpredictability kind of gets understood by both sides over time, and hopefully, that lessens some of the awkwardness that may exist. But curious to hear what you have to think about the people question.
Well, I think that's a great answer that you gave, Nick. And when I say that people are unpredictable, that sends alarm bells off with me. Yes, life is unpredictable, but I don't know that people, especially in a management situation, are unpredictable. Of course, there's such a thing as aberrant behavior, but I don't think that's what's it. I think what's happening is when managers might say, well, the people are unpredictable, that's because they're not setting up clear standards of performance, stating clear expectations. And they're not communicating for that. They might be saying, well, we need to do this, providing no resources, no direction, no support, no dialogue, no nothing. Well, if I'm in that team, I might be unpredictable too. So I think the first thing is to set your expectations. What is it that we need to do? And how are we going to do it? All right? And this is where purpose comes in, because if we know what we're all about, then whatever my assignment is, it becomes a task which is in the greater situation of contributing to the whole. So that's where you delimit, you get rid of a lot of unpredictability. But and also go back to what you had said, frequent communication. Absolutely. So that's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when we were building Rypple, one of the things we heard so much from people that we talked to in the world of work was that they felt kind of adrift. They didn't really understand what they should be working on, and obviously that leads to unpredictability too. When you don't really even know whether you're working on the right stuff, and then all of a sudden you have an unpleasant interaction with your leader because it turns out that the stuff you've been working on isn't really impacting the organization in the way that you thought. And so the idea of being able to connect with the people that you work with in an ongoing way, I think is helpful for developing that level of understanding.
Absolutely, absolutely. So.
Now, the next question, how does one develop the capabilities and competencies of a strong leader?
Good question. That'll take you a lifetime to answer. I think, no, seriously, I will say leadership is a choice. So what do? You can read about leaders, you observe leaders, what works, what doesn't. Very often look at the men and women in your circle whom you respect. It could be a national leader, could be a parent, could be a coach, could be a community leader, whomever it is. What is it about that individual that draws people to him or her? And invariably, it's a sense of purpose. Leaders bring people together for common purpose. So what are the behaviors that a leader is doing? Watch their communication. Watch how they delegate. Watch how they set expectations. Very importantly, are they accountable? Are they accountable for their actions? Do they hold themselves to the same high standards? So leadership in this thing, from a learning sense, becomes a learning proposition, a learning proposition, but it's also an observation. And one little note I'd throw in there is that let's not forget, leaders are fallible. Leaders do make mistakes, will always make mistakes. That doesn't discount them from being leaders. But those who take those mistakes and learn from them, and it makes them more capable and more able to lead others, that's the kind of person you want to learn from. That's the kind of person you want to observe. So that's a 2-cent answer on a lifetime's worth of topics.
No, I think, it's the big question that everyone's asking. And it's interesting because the way that we've developed Rypple as a tool for managers and for employers, we were asking ourselves that question all the time, because I think you know a great leader or a great manager when you see them, but the question is, what are those key behaviors that all great managers just do, that just comes naturally to them, and how can you absorb and carry out some of those behaviors yourself? And all the research that we did showed, and you talked about a lot of these things, all of them in fact, is this concept of recognizing people for great work. And I think people underestimate how much just a simple message of thanks can inspire people and get them to work harder. And just giving people feedback on work when they do it, rather than waiting months to let them know how they're doing. And the last thing is just coaching people to achieve goals. We take it for granted in sports that without a good coach, a team is going to fail. But yet, in the business context, and John, as a coach, that it's often a skill set that is undervalued and underappreciated.
Oh, without question. Good leaders are good coaches. And coaching is that investment in another. And it's helping that individual, that young man, or not just a young man, a young woman, young man, older woman, achieve their potential, develop their own skills. And it's an investment in helping someone grow and develop their capabilities so that they can become more proficient at whatever it is they do. And that's the essence of coaching, and good leaders are good coaches.
Right. Absolutely. I think we have time for one more question. How, as a leader, how do you motivate a team that doesn't stand behind a goal?
It's a good one. Probably the straightforward answer is you can't. Motivation is the process of creating conditions for people to succeed. However, let's be honest, every bit of work we do isn't what we want to do. And let's assume, for the sake of this question, that we're not asking people to do unethical things, of course. But let's just say, every job you undertake, every goal you have, isn't going to excite you. But this is where the work of management comes in. This is where the work of leadership is. Hey, it's a matter of personal responsibility. The company hired us to do a job. by gosh, let's do the best we can. Let's play it out. Let's do what we can do. Let's make it happen. And if you can't agree with that, then you should take yourself off the payroll. Think of it like this. Sometimes a team at the end of the season, a professional team at the end of the year, they got no chance of winning a playoff. But, the good teams, they go out there day after day and the players excel. They're saying, hey, the patrons are coming, the fans are coming to watch us skate, watch us play ball, whatever it is, we owe it to them to put on a good show. Actors do this in a dramatic presentation, and this is what means being a professional is about your work. So you get to the nature of what work is, what your purpose is, and what you want to do well, and take pride in that. And that pride, it comes from within. It cannot be imposed to you. You can have team pride, but ultimately you have to feel that sense of pride, that sense of purpose. And if you do, that's when the team can succeed for itself and do the best it can with a given task, with a given objective.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I'll also say one more final thing, which is just that I think that the question sort of raises another question, which is what exactly is a goal, if not a common purpose for a group of individuals or colleagues to rally around. And so, I would say that, one of the reasons we've built our goal feature within Rypple to be very interactive and very social. And it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. It's that you need to get people to buy in and get behind and believe in what the goals are. And if they're not, then maybe as a leader you need to rethink whether your organization, you as a leader, are focusing on the right things.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today, and I'd especially like to thank John for being here, and just to let all of you know that we have a couple more great webinars coming up this month on the 16th and again on the 29th, where we will be talking about how to do great work and how to learn how to coach with compassion. So we hope that you will join us for those. And once again, thank you to John for a terrific presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to you, Nick, to Rypple, and to all of our guests on the line today.